Greetings all, Ferrariman601 here. On the back of the 3 Porsche Pack releases for Assetto Corsa that were given to us in the last 2 months of 2016, Porsche have reaffirmed their re-entry into sim racing with this release, the Porsche 911 GT3 Cup car, available here in iRacing to all iRacing subscribers for the nominal price of $11.95 US via the iRacing client. Do check it out if you have not done so already. Porsche coming back into sim racing has been a really big deal. And I think it's been a really big deal for some really good reasons. Sim racing, it has really exploded into the industry that we now see it as today. 10 years ago, when Porsche said enough, it really had not caught on yet. Hardware available on the consumer level was still not quite up to snuff in terms of what a brand like Porsche wanted to portray in the virtual world, but certainly advancements in technology and advancements in marketing, of course, since the advent of sims like R-Factor, iRacing, Assetto Corsa, you name them, Porsche really now have a platform through which they can display their products accurately and give all of us mere mortals who would never otherwise have the chance to even get up close to a race car, to give us the chance to sample them and see what they must be like to drive and what they must be like to race. From Porsche here, we're going to go into the technical specs, courtesy of Porsche.com. First of all, in terms of length, the car measures 4,547 millimeters long, and it is 1,280 millimeters high. So these are all nominal dimensions for a Class GT3 tin-top race car, as you see. In terms of the power, producing our power is an all-aluminum 6-cylinder rear-mounted boxer engine. For those of you who don't know, boxer or flat or horizontally opposed, that refers to the cylinder bank angle. So like most 6-cylinder engines, you have 2 banks of 3 cylinders each on either side of the crankshaft, but in a boxer or a flat or horizontally opposed, whatever you want to call it, the 2 banks of cylinders are opposed to each other at 180 degrees. So if you were to draw a straight line from the top of one cylinder head to the top of the other cylinder head, you would see that the angle is 180 degrees. In other words, if we remember from geometry class, you would be drawing a straight line. So the engine, for all intents and purposes, is flat. Of course, the engine's not really flat. It is in 3 dimensions, and there are all sorts of ancillary components, but I think you get the idea. 6-cylinder, flat 6 in the back. Porsche, of course, legendary for these engines. The engine's putting out about 460 horsepower here, according to Porsche, and that power is transmitted through a Porsche-designed 6-speed sequential semi-automatic gearbox actuated via paddles on the steering wheel, just like a modern Formula 1 car. LMP1 and a whole bunch of road cars now are using paddle shift gearboxes. For brakes, we have disc brakes all around, of course. In the front, we have aluminum 6-piston calipers. 6-piston calipers on a GT car. You got a lot of braking force up front, and you've got 4-piston calipers in the back. So good brakes on this thing all around. For our steering and suspension, we've got McPherson struts at the front. Of course, they are infinitely adjustable, and they are, of course, independent suspension on the rear as well, with non-adjustable racing shock absorbers. The front and back, of course, supplemented by anti-roll bars, as you would expect. The car also features a full roll cage safety fuel cell, so the sort of inflatable, impenetrable bladder that you get to contain the fuel for safety reasons, and of course the car is complemented with a full fire extinguisher system. These requirements mean that the car is, of course, homologated for international GT racing. You'll see this car racing in a whole bunch of endurance championships, both here in the United States and, of course, around the world. The 24 Hours of Daytona happening this weekend. You'll see a few of these cars running around the banking at Daytona. Can't wait for that race. It's, for me, the official start of the racing season, and of course, it's been a long time since we've had any real top-level international motorsport happening, so if you're watching this video and the 24 Hours of Daytona are going on, stop right now, go watch Daytona, come back later. You've been warned. In any event, you may notice that this review is not quite going to be as polished as some of the Assetto Corsa reviews, simply because iRacing doesn't really have great visuals in comparison to Assetto Corsa. Yes, they're still good, but it's not quite as polished. You don't have the showroom view where we're able to have a look at the car internally and externally, so perhaps not quite as polished as you're used to, but still going to try to give you a good impression of what the car is like, both outside, inside, and, of course, what it's like out on track. Show you what the car's like in the cockpit. Let's go into the cockpit here. And here we are. You can see the driving view here. Great visibility out the front windscreen. You can see those fenders there just sort of peeking up below the bottom of the windscreen there, but great visibility all around. We can look left and you can see just a little bit of the driver helmet surround on the left-hand portion of your screen. You can see the door handle there, the weave of the carbon fiber throughout, and the rear view mirror on the left-hand side, very nicely rendered there. Of course, back to center, you've got your steering wheel with all of your buttons recreated, and of course the paddles on the back. Flat bottom steering wheel as well. That's for ways to accommodate different sized drivers and different seat heights, because of course in endurance races this car would be driven by a number of different people, so just to make the cockpit a little bit more accessible to all. Then of course we can look right and you can see a little bit more of the interior detail. You can see the center stack there on the dashboard with just some switches and toggles for the fuel pump, things like that, the ignition switch, the master kill right there. And on the right-hand side of the car, you can see some of the X-frame cross members there for the roll cage, all very nicely recreated. And of course, you don't really see these things while you're driving the car, but very nice to see the, per usual, impeccable modeling inside and out for this car in iRacing. In terms of the car's overall fit in iRacing, I think it's very appropriate. iRacing has a lot of touring cars in it, and many events in iRacing are suited for touring cars. So I think this release, the first one from Porsche for iRacing, certainly is very appropriate indeed. We can power the car on here, and we can talk about what we see on the dashboard. Before the engine fires up, you can see you have an alarm for oil pressure there on the bottom, and then as the engine fires, that alarm goes away because now we have oil pressure. Of course, at the top you've got the big N for neutral, and above that N you've got the tach, your numerical tach anyway, so that's your RPM, and then you have a visual representation of that across the top. You're going to have shift lights on the very top of the dash panel above the display, of course, which is very nice. Toward the left-hand side of the screen, you've got water and oil temp. So water temp is at 171 Fahrenheit, and oil temp is at 174 Fahrenheit right now. And then you have more information about the engine below that. You have water pressure at 6.7, and then you have oil pressure at 57.8. I'm not quite sure in what units those measurements are. I think they're most likely PSI, but not quite sure on that. You have a fuel level, the big 26.41 you can see on the right-hand side, so you'll see that tick down as the fuel load burns down, and then you will see a time delta below that. So you'll have a current lap time, and then you'll have a delta from your fastest lap, and then finally you have your speed, we're measuring in miles per hour, below the N. The gearbox in this car, as I mentioned, it is a 6-speed semi-automatic sequential. However, it has some very interesting sounds, and we'll demonstrate that right now. You don't hear them so much while the car's actually running, but while you're just sitting still going up and down through the box, you'll hear this. So you hear the initial clunk of the gears being engaged there as all the dog collars come in and slap into place, but you also hear this whirring or buzzing noise after the shift has been completed. And what I think this is the hydraulic pump just coming back up to pressure here to pre-pressure all the hydraulic lines to actuate that gear change. Obviously you'd get a slight drop in pressure as the gear change is actuated, so you hear that on the upshift and on the downshift as well. So it's an interesting thing. I've not heard that in any other car in any other sim before, so I like that sense of immersion. I've never heard this car in reality in a situation like this, just going up and down through the box with the engine running stopped in the pits, but it's an interesting touch, and I don't know, I like it. It's different. Of course, you also get it for technically the upshift into reverse, but you don't get it going into neutral, either from first or from reverse. Interesting. In terms of other functionalities, you've got brake bias, and you can see I'm adjusting that now. You can see the screen on the left-hand side has changed from the engine display to the brake bias display, so you can adjust that any way you like. And of course you've got a pit lane speed limiter, which I have punched up now. It changes the dash display entirely. Your gear is now on the left-hand side, your speed is now a big number in the center, and your throttle position from 0 to 100 is displayed on the right. So very cool indeed to see the different pages on the dash implemented. So without further ado, let's get the thing out on track and just talk about the overall balance and the driving dynamics. This is the baseline default setup for those of you who are wondering. So first gear, and off we go. Also, I should probably mention we are at the Nürburgring today. This is, of course, not the Nordschleife. This is the Grand Prix circuit without the inner stadium section. And we're just going to go on an install here and make sure we've got everything working properly. We're through the box. And we're just going to get the tires and brakes up to temperature. You can start to get a sense of those sounds. I have to say, very nice sounds internally from this car. I love the little wobble, the trill you get on the upshift. Nice elasticity of the driveline. I love it. This car is not a hybrid, unlike Porsche's LMP1 cars of late, and unlike a lot of cars of late. Traditional car, producing maximum power at about 7,500 RPM, so this engine does like to rev. Now on our first flying lap here. Still getting some heat into the brakes. Very good braking performance already, very stable. Good feel on the brakes, and of course they bite right away. They don't leave you guessing very much. As we blast downhill toward the hairpin, you can see pretty decent acceleration. Again, the car is developing about 460 horsepower, so you've got plenty of grunt. And of course, for something that's got two doors and a roof, the performance is certainly more than adequate. Alright, these pretty hard iRacing tires are now starting to come up to temperature. The car starts to feel like it's there for me. We can start to get on with the program of talking about what it's like. A little hard over the curbs there. Of course, things get a little bit squirrely when it's off the ground, but so far, I've got to say, the car handles quite nicely. The default setup, of course, is biased toward understeer. I don't know if anybody actually races this car with the default setup unless you're in a fixed setup situation, so you can dial all of that out according to your preferences. However, the default setup, aside from that understeer, so far feeling quite nice indeed. I've got decent traction, even out of low-speed corners. You can see there in second gear, full throttle straight away, not going to spin the wheels. Everything performing quite nicely already. Understeer coming in again. Having to tickle the throttle, just waiting for the front end to catch up with itself there. But, again, through the traction zones, plenty of confidence, plenty of grip. terms of overall usability, in some other iRacing reviews that I've done, I've been critical of how iRacing emulates gearbox mechanics, particularly on the Audi 90, where, yes, it is a manual gearbox, but you just have to be so precise with it that it feels unrealistic. This, yes, it is a very different sort of gearbox. It's a semi-automatic sequential. However, I've got to say, very nicely done. The algorithms that are run in the gearbox must have been done very nicely because everything is very convincing, it's very usable. You get an auto lift on the upshift and you get an auto blip on the downshift, as you can see there in the lower left with my pedal traces. The little blip that you see is not me, that is the computer doing the rev matching. Gearbox is very responsive. The instant you pull the paddle, you are in the next gear. So I wouldn't call it seamless, but certainly it is very quick and very smooth. The gear changes do not unsettle the rear end. Everything is just very predictable and very clean. Big traction zone there. The power comes on. No issue at all. Good traction all around. You may be able to see also on the dashboard, pay attention into the braking zones for the lower speed corners. You'll notice those lights on either side of the main display. They will turn on as I approach locking one of the front wheels. Of course, there is no ABS system, no anti-lock brakes on this car. So you get a little bit of a visual aid to just tell you when you're getting a little bit too close to the overall limit of braking performance. So come off the pedal and adjust accordingly. Into the chicane at the top of the hill, you'll probably be able to see those lights start to flicker a little bit as I'm on the brakes hard. Or not. Alright, coming into the final corner, I'm just going to slam the brakes and you'll see those lights illuminate. There you go. Yellow lights on the bottom when the fronts are completely locked up. And then coming into turn one here, you'll see the red lights at the top of those columns start to come on. Just, again, to tell you, come off the brake a little bit, you're overdoing it. There you go. Saw them on the right-hand side there come on. Just to tell you, you're overwhelming the tires. Interesting little feature. Again, that's another thing I've not seen before. Into the Schumacher S. No way you can take this flat out, just tickling the throttle to the midsection of the complex and then hard on the power for the exit. Kind of tuck the nose in here. The entry to this corner is off camber, but then you got a lot of camber help for the exit. Very nice. The chicane. Saw those lights come on there as I really stomped on the brakes. Back end gets swirly over the curbs there if you hit them too hard, as you would most likely expect. Again, the tire has to be on the ground to generate grip. And then the back end gets really out of shape. Interesting. Very interesting indeed. I don't think we've got any damage. Car feels all right. Also, probably a good time to talk about how resilient this car is. Because your engine's at the back, and of course the gearbox is at the back as well, there's not much to damage up front, so if you do kind of kiss the barrier like that, you will most likely be able to carry on. It's probably why these cars are quite popular among GT teams. Also, just notice this. Have a look at the rear view mirror that you can see in the top of the screen. That's vibrating an awful lot. Is it realistic? Is it not? I don't know, but just kind of makes you think twice about maybe making some maneuvers out on track, or if somebody's on your rear end chasing you in a race. Might have to look up there a little bit longer than you may prefer, so just keep that in mind. But it's a nice touch. No, don't do that to me again. There we go. Kind of balancing the car through the slide there with the throttle. Bit of weight bias to the rear, as you may imagine, because that engine is sitting right on top of the rear axle, and the gearbox is a transaxle, so all your weight transferred certainly to the rear. And that only gets worse under acceleration, as you may prefer, or as you may infer, rather. So, certainly it has the propensity for some tail happiness. But overall, when you're not thrashing it too much, again, default setup, there is a bit of understeer. But once you're applying the power more reasonably, it settles to a happy medium in neutral slide territory. Again, though, I've got to say, iRacing, particularly, they've done a great job with the sounds. I just love them. Recover to the pits. Show you some running on the limiter here. And there are the cones. Limiter line. You can see the dash goes from green to red when you're above the pit lane speed limit, so as you're braking and you apply the limiter, it'll probably be red, and then when it's green, you're in the safe zone to avoid a penalty. And then just sitting here at full throttle, see 100% in the right, ramp off the throttle, and it goes down proportionally. Very, very cool indeed. So there we have it. The Porsche 911 GT3 Cup car, new in iRacing this week. Again, $11.95 via the iRacing client. All of you loyal iRacing subscribers, you certainly want to be checking this thing out, because I think it has the potential to be one of the best cars in iRacing for GT class action, and certainly I have intent to get on track in anger with this thing and just see how I stack up against all you guys who race iRacing a bit more often than I do, I have to say, and usually when I am in iRacing, I'm in IndyCar. But I started sim racing in tin tops all the way back in 1999 on Gran Turismo 2 for the PlayStation, so I do have a soft spot for these kinds of cars, and I am certainly eager to be checking them out in action in anger. So maybe we'll see each other on track. Who knows? However, of course, for every other review that I do, we have hot laps to come without commentary from external and onboard shots, so you can have a sense of what this car looks like when it's just pounding around here at the Nürburgring, and decide for yourself whether or not you want to make the $11.95 investment to try this car out in your own hands. So do stay tuned for the hot laps, everybody, but I have to thank you all so very much for watching and for your continued support of the channel. We're continuing to grow, and I'm still having a great time making videos for all of you, and I enjoy your comments, your likes, of course your subscriptions. I love interacting with all of you. So thank you all very much for your viewership, and of course stay tuned for the hot laps. For iRacing's 601 saying thank you very much, everybody.